we went.
Yeah,
we
so
went
go on the
before,
red
we went
dot.
last
It'll
week,
say
we went to the
record.
wedding in Detroit. This week we're going to the wedding in Chicago. Then we're going to go to Florida. By the time I come back, it's Purim already. You know,
Right.
or before Purim. So like
It'll
I'm
be
a little-
Purim already. Then 6 weeks after that is Pesach.
We have another bar mitzvah, A.B.
Now it says record, yeah.
At the kollel. At the kollel.
I want to,
Okay. Shh.
first of all, thank everybody for joining us from far and near. Thank all the people that helped orchestrate this this Seuda. I guess Chaya did most of the work. My mother also helped, and all of the people here who helped in various ways, and of course all our children helped, and they were just non-stop assistance and helping shopping and keeping the house in order and everything. And
Right.
Oh, yeah.
thank them for that.
Shy.
Daddy's talking. We're here to commemorate the end of the Shloshim for my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, Chaya Rezel Bas Yitzchak. Just as a means of introduction, I'm not going to speak long, but my grandmother was born in the Ukraine close to a century ago. She arrived in New York as a very young girl with really no family. I mean, she had a father here who had remarried. Her mother had died when she was in Russia. So she came here not knowing anybody, and she had her struggles, but she finally found my grandfather. They married, started a family, and lived off very, very little, but sacrificed everything for their children. She was, when she was, I think she was around 12 or 13 when she came to America, and she was raised by her aunts in Russia, with obviously very little communication with her father, who had remarried in New York, given the fact that in the 1920s, I guess I'll say the cell phone rates were a little higher than they are today, and they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And but she was raised by her aunts, and they imbued with her a lot of tradition, did a lot of what they knew. They didn't know a lot about Torah and stuff, and that, and Yahadus and Yiddishkeit, but they instilled in her an appreciation and and an importance of this, and she kept, and this was very important to her throughout her life. She should always convey that to me and to all of us, how proud she was that her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren were in yeshiva, and how they were keeping Torah, and this was something that she valued very highly. So it's appropriate that in this context we're doing a Seuda, as we're commemorating with a Siyum, that to mark the Shloshim for my grandmother, who this area was important to her, and she valued it very highly. Recently, in the last few months, and I guess more the last few weeks since she passed away, there've been a lot of reminiscing, and many of us have pointed out that when I was younger, I grew up, I had, well, my 4 grandparents. My father's father passed away after my parents got married. My older brother's named for him. And then my mother's 2 parents one passed away, I was, I think, 11 in 6th grade, and then her mother passed away a few years later, but she had already started the long process of Alzheimer's, so we didn't really have communications with her from that point on. From 1987 or 88, she was not at my bar mitzvah already. So when I grew up, really the one person I had, the person that we looked up to in the previous generation was my Grandma Rose. And she was always there for us. Anytime we needed something, she always came. If we needed help, my mother had to have surgery at different points, or she had to go to the hospital, she would come in, help. And I always have an image of her giving me a bath. I don't know why, but I have an image of that. And she was always there for us when we needed her. But we had pointed out that she was really the only grandparent we had. Now, if you can go to fast forward almost to the current times, we're blessed that our children are blessed to have 4 grandparents, but they inherited for many, many years, but they also were blessed to have a great grandmother, which they'll have memories of. I don't know how great those memories will be. They'll definitely have memories. But my sister's children, who are much older, especially the three older ones, Ephraim, Yossi, and Simma, and Tamar also, will have a lot more than memories of. Obviously, they have a close relationship with their four grandparents, Leah and Hara as well, but they have a special they have a special treat, a special gift that not only were they blessed to have four grandparents that they're close with, but they were blessed to have two great-grandmothers, which they were very, very close with. And they'll have more than just memories because they're a lot older than mine. I mean, Ephraim, my oldest nephew, is 18, and Yossi is 17, Simma is 13, and Tamar is 8. So they'll have a lot more than memories, but the relationship that they develop with Grandma Rose, and also another special grandma they had was Bubby Reisman, and she was a Bubby to them and almost a Bubby to all of us. So they grew up knowing their great-grandmothers and having a very close relationship with their great-grandmothers, and that was it's a very big gift, and it's something that hopefully will be with them the rest of their lives, and that tremendous gift. On that note, I'd ask the oldest great-grandchild present to say a few words in commemoration of Grandma Rose. So Yossi is going to say a few words.
A lot of what I'm going to say, my uncle already touched on. I wrote it down first.
You're saying it.
So I want to start by saying that I'm very thankful that I was able to know Grandma Rose for so many years. I knew her for 17 years. She taught me so many lessons, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'm also grateful for the fact that I had a great-grandmother from my father's side, Bubby Reisman, who lived until approximately a little bit less than 2 years ago, who I was very close with, and I was able to learn a lot of lessons from also. Grandma, as my uncle said, grew up and it was very tough for her. Like she didn't have much. Her mother passed away when she was very young, and her father was in America. Then she came, and she was raised by people that weren't her parents. It was very difficult for her, but she didn't give up. She fought through it, and she was very strong. And I take a lesson to that every day. Every time I feel like I can't do it, I always look to Grandma, because Grandma was always strong. She always fought through it, and even towards the end when she was sick, she fought through everything, and it was incredible. I don't know how she did it. Like sometimes I think it's a little hard to study before a test, and I just look at Grandma, and it's like amazing. I thought I'd start by that, and I'll always remember Grandma. I'm very blessed to have known her for 17 years, and for her to have taught me a very important lesson.
Honored that Rabbi Aaron Cohen from the Tiferet came to join us and share some words. And Rabbi Cohen.
A kavod that Jonathan asked me to participate in this particular Suda and a Siyum. I know some of the family, and the little that I know of the family really is instructive sometimes in terms of determining who mother and the grandmother was and great-grandmother was. Obviously, that we know that there are certain kinds of midos and characteristics that are passed down to descendants, and really a very, very special family, the Krimsky family, and obviously it's indicative, reflective of the very special midos that Chai Reis of Bas Yitzchak must have had. Somebody who, unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to know, but nonetheless, I'll just like to mention one brief idea, which very central idea, which comes up in this coming week's parsha. We know that one of the Aseres Hadibros is Kadesh Avicha V'Asimecha, and Mepharshim talk about how this particular tzivui is one which on the surface seems to be Binodam L'Chaveiro, and then on the other hand it's associated with Binodam L'Makom as well. In the structure of the Aseres Hadibros, it's aligned with the Dibros which are Binodam L'Makom. And here there's one of those sources, the Ramban, where the Ramban just has a few lines in which he talks about this association between Kabed Zavich V'Asimecha, the respect that one is supposed to have for one's parents, and the relationship that one has with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. and he talks about how the two are so intertwined with one another. I'm just going to read a couple of lines from Ramban and basically explain it. That's all I'm going to do. He says the following. The Torah here completes everything that it wants to tell us succinctly in regard to the Aseret Adibros. When it talks about the obligations we have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then it wraps everything up with this particular tzivui. And talks about the parents that who are the ones who are the shutfim, the partners together with Hashem in creation. Ki Hashem Avinu Harishon v'Amolid Avinu Achron. Because Hashem is really like our first father, he says, and the one who gave birth to us is considered to be like our the last father, the one who is also, there's an equation here, a common denominator between the two of them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us, but on the other hand, we have to recognize that our parents created us as well. And therefore, he says, that's why it says in Sefer Dvarim, it says, Kasher Tzivi Sicha. It says, when in regard to the tzivui of Kibbud Av Ve'em, which is mentioned in Sefer Dvarim, there it says, Kasher Tzivi Sicha, as I have already commanded you. And the Ramban explains, Kasher Tzivi Sicha means, just as I've commanded you in regard to giving kavod to me, Hashem says, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so too, I'm commanding you in regard to giving honor to your parents, because of this equation, because one is derived from the other. One goes hand in hand with the other. You can't envision, says the Ramban, giving kavod to HaKadosh Baruch Hu without giving kavod to the parents, and the reverse is true, of course, as well. So you have to have, if you have a debt of gratitude, and you demonstrate and you show, you recognize what you owe to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so obviously you have to do it for the parents as well. So therefore Hashem can say, Kasher Tzivi Sicha, just as I've commanded you, Hashem says to give kavod to him, to Hashem, so too obviously you have to give kavod to your parents already. It's an amazing thing that tzivui automatically, inevitably has to lead to the other obligation as well. And then he says that really the equation is very similar. Because in the Aseret we see over here that you have to declare Anochi Hashem Elokecha, you have to know that Hashem is the one who took us out of Mitzrayim, and he's the one who's responsible for us living, and you have to make sure Lo Elohim Achim Al Panah, you're not allowed to serve another God. You have to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't deny HaKadosh Baruch Hu's involvement, you can't attribute your success to anyone else, and your ability to be able to function to anyone else. So he says the following, Sheyoda, he says, that we learn in the same way, Sheyoda Boshu Aviv, that you have to acknowledge that this is your father or mother, V'lo yichbar bo, le'mor al adam acher shu aviv, and you can't deny, or you can't in any way assume that someone else is responsible, and someone else has brought you into the world, that someone else is responsible for having brought you up and taught you and inculcated all the values that you have. You can't attribute that to anyone else. Just like in regard to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so too in regard to parents. Also, you have to recognize that there's not an Elohim Achirim. There's not another set of parents. There's only one set of parents. And these are the parents who had this impact upon you, and they were the ones that molded you. And just like we're expected to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as our master, as the Borei Olem, as the one who did everything for us, and we owe everything to, and not because of the fact that we have an ulterior motive and we have some other goal in mind. No, it's not supposed to be Shalom Lishma, it's supposed to be Lishma. We have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu because we have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us and we owe everything to him. So too over here, he says that when one relates to one's parents and one serves one's parents, also it has to be with that same mindset, that same motivation, that a person shouldn't do it because of some kind of reward that the person is going to get, or because of some kind of expectation. No, it has to be because the fact is one's parents, that one owes everything to one's parents. So in this particular context, of course, at a yard site or a Shloshim Siyum, when one is, the family is gathering together in order to remember the impact that mother, grandmother, great-grandmother had on the family. It's exactly like this Ramban, recognizing, acknowledging the everlasting, permanent impact that this person had upon everyone in the family. And just like the Ramban says that this is something which is so important, it's quoting from Chaval, but dramatizing this, that this is something which is so important, it's in a sense equated to the cover that we owe to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so that Hashem can say, Kasher tzivisicha, just like you commanded me not to my covet, so obviously you have to give covet to parents. So this is true in regard to parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, that one has to recognize the impact that they've had upon our lives. Bez Hashem, through this gathering and going into the future as well, should continue to be able to think and to contemplate, to be able to recognize and appreciate the impact that she had upon everybody here, and the Suda and the Siyum and everything else should be Leah for her neshama.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Attended the memorial service. I should stand? Okay. Oh, boy. Those of you that attended the memorial service, I was able to summarize, my brother and I summarized my mother's life, as Jonathan said. But it was more than that. She really gave everything she could to take care of my brother and I. And she was ahead of her time. Many times, for example, we would buy meat, and she would trim off the fat from the meat. And she told me that, she said, don't eat the fat, it's no good for you. I said, really? How do you know? Because she never went to school to study hygiene or nutrition. She said, I know, it's just no good for you. So she trimmed away the fat. The milk, when we started to buy milk during the war and after the war, the milk was not homogenized. It had cream on the top. And she would tell me, don't eat the cream on top. It's fat, it's no good for you. And eventually, of course, the cream on the top was homogenized. They started selling homogenized milk around 1950, 51. No, 45, 46, 47, something like that. The milk was pasteurized, but not homogenized. So my mother was ahead of her time, and she would watch what she ate, and she also never broke any promises. She was limited in her in how much education she had, because she came here at 12 or 13 years old, and she went to school for 3 years. In the last few years, she was still managing her financial accounts, her bank accounts. She was writing checks, managing her money, turning over CDs. This was for a woman who was 97 years old. Okay? And instructing the bank tellers how to move CDs from one interest rate to another interest rate. She was very good with numbers, even though she had only 3 years of schooling. She had to leave school at the end when she was 16 years old. She started when she was 13. They put her in the second grade. And by the time she was 16, she was already in the 7th grade, which I think is normal for, 16 she was in the, 16 she was in the 10th grade, I think 10th grade, something like that. And she had to leave school when she was 16 because she had to work and bring in money because my grandfather had 3 other children, and so my mother was sent out to work, and she found work as a sales lady and a seamstress, working in the garment industry at that time. And she didn't get very long. She did not get along with my stepmother, so my mother moved out of the house, and this was unheard of back then, unheard of. So she moved out of the house, and she hooked up with a Russian woman that she met at a Russian club, who took her in, and she paid her money. She was a boarder. And the Russian woman said, you know, I have a son, maybe you should meet him. And that became my father. They met at a Russian club, and she stayed with my grandmother, actually. And my grandmother visited us in Baltimore. She unfortunately died at age 65 from a cerebral hemorrhage. But she had not seen her husband for 12 years because on my father's side, my grandfather left Russia when the last child was born, so my father was about 5 years old, and he was away for 12 years, just like my grandfather. That's what they did then. Unheard of. So we're fortunate, my cousins and I have two other cousins who are alive, are on the shoulders of my grandparents and great-grandparents and parents who came from the other side. And they worked very hard. There was no welfare, there was no aid for dependent children or anything like that at that time. You had to work or you didn't eat. And so I'm fortunate that I was able to go to school and go to college and in the city of New York. And I remember my mother, who only had education for 3 years, she was testing me in French when I was in junior high school. We had to take a language, right? So she was reading the words in French, and I was reciting them back to her. and she was, in a sense, testing me. And and she would send me down to the grocery store to buy groceries, and she would always check the addition on the grocery bag. That's how they did it then. The grocer would put everything in a bag, and he'd write down the items on the bag, and he'd add them up, and then I brought her upstairs, and she would always check the addition. Remember, she had only 3 years of education. She checked the addition until she trusted me when I was older. And then she trusted me to do the addition, and so she didn't have to add them up anymore, because, she trusted me to add the numbers. But she always wanted the numbers added, to make sure that the grocer didn't make any mistakes. And God forbid, if he made a mistake, we'd have to go downstairs and point it out and show him that his addition was wrong, and recover whatever there was to recover. So she, she did the best she could. And when my father passed away in 1966, 6 months after we were married, she decided she had to go out and go to work, because she didn't work before then, really. And so she found a job, and she said she has to deal with this, and she didn't want to come to Boston and stay with us. She wanted to make it on her own. And she did, until she retired from work. So I think I've said enough. Jonathan summarized it very nicely, my brother and the other people who spoke at the memorial service, which included Naomi. No, Naomi spoke at the funeral, but it was Jonathan and my brother and I. So that's and yeah, Dorothy, yeah. Sorry, I'm going to get this. Dorothy spoke also at the memorial service, and she had some very nice things to say about my mother. She knew my mother when we got married, and I remember her calling my parents up in Cambridge. I lived in Cambridge, and they didn't know I was going out or dating or anything like that. I didn't want them to be involved in this, and I didn't want them to nudge me and ask me or anything like that. So I kept it pretty much to myself, who I was going with or anything like that. So one day, Dorothy and I, we saw each other for a number of months, and we got engaged. So I called my parents up from my apartment in Cambridge, you remember. And my mother was absolutely shocked and flabbergasted. She thought I was drunk. She said, "Yeah, you drunk?" I said, "No, I'm not drunk. I never got drunk, actually." So she couldn't believe it, but Dorothy spoke to her and said hello, and then we went in to New York and we met my parents. But my parents never expected me, because they never really knew what I was doing, my social life in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So those are just a few of the tidbits that I can recall. I can recall much more, but I've said enough. And for those of you who know, maybe Jonathan knows, I am writing a book about this, and it's all down. And maybe in 2 years or so, you'll see it. All my there's so many things I can remember and recall that that you just wouldn't believe. From the time my father took me to a christening aboard the Liberty ships that he was building in Baltimore. He had me on his shoulders, and I was watching a christening of the Liberty ships. My father worked on Liberty ships because the port of Baltimore asked for workers. This was the war, and all the men were drafted into the army. There were 16 million men and women in the armed forces of the United States at that time. And so those who were not eligible, they were too old, or they're 4F, or whatever, were sent to work in the factories to make Liberty ships, tanks, guns, airplanes, and whatever, including women. And women entered the workforce in large numbers. And so my father went to Baltimore, got himself a job working as a metal worker on board the Liberty ship. So I had occasion to witness at least one christening. I was standing on his shoulders above the crowd, and we watched the woman, take the bottle and smash the ship, and the ship went down the dock, and big hooray, it didn't sink. Went into the water. They were producing one ship a week. Unbelievable. One Liberty ship a week. Liberty ships carry troops, tanks, materiel for the war effort, and they were all lined up and at one time sent to Europe, to France to unload. And boy, they came in by the thousands. And so my father was working on that ship. And when I was a young boy, my mother took me to a movie called Tomorrow the World. You never heard of it? You never heard of it? Tomorrow the World was a movie made with Frederick March. Have you heard of Frederick March? Great movie actor. Have you heard of it? No, he's a great movie actor. 1950s, 60s, and 70s, Frederick March. Anyway, the movie was about a young boy named Emil who came to America to be adopted by his uncle or relatives. He was imbued with the spirit of Nazism, and he tried to convert the family to Nazism. But in the end, they converted him. It was a very scary movie. And my mother took me to go to a movie in Baltimore. We walked to the movie theater and walked back. But I remember it after all those years. And it was an interesting movie for her, I guess, but for me it was scary. But I still remember the movie. You can't buy it. I tried buying it on DVD, but I don't know what happened to it. But anyway, you know, I think I've spoken enough and taken up your time. But there's some fond memories I have of my mother, and we have lots of albums and pictures and things. And some of the things I'm putting down in a book for my grandchildren and children so they can read about it. Okay? What do you want to do with this? What? Oh, the Siyum. Oh, the Siyum. Well, I only did the last 2 chapters, like you told me. Jonathan told me what to do. So what I'm going to do is summarize the last 2 chapters in Sanhedrin. That's 10 and 11. Okay? And I'll summarize it very quickly. I took some notes. I was mandated to learn this, right? So I read it. I don't know if I learned it, but I read it. And I studied it. I did study it, honestly. Okay, so the Masechta starts off by saying all Israel has a portion in Olam Haba. But the Mishnah does not specify how large a portion everyone has. Because there's no way to measure it. Or compare portions. Even condemned prisoners to death have a portion in the world to come. This is right out of the Mishnah. And even righteous, non-Jewish members have a portion in the world to come. But the Mishnah doesn't say how much of a portion is or how you measure it. I don't know how you measure a portion. Maybe the rabbi knows. I don't know.
He's keeping quiet.
The following persons have no portion in Olam Haba. And there's a whole list of people that have no portion. These are deniers of Techiyat HaMesim, deniers that Moses wrote the Torah, atheists, the 3 kings, Jeroboam, Achab, and Manasseh, 4 commoners, Bilam, Doeg, Ahitophel, and Gehazi. I know about a few of them, Gehazi and Bilam, but I'm not sure about Antiphol and Doeg, but I can look that up, I suppose. The generation of the flood who did not survive, they didn't merit Olam Haba. Generation of the dispersion who built the Tower of Babel, men of Sodom, they just said men, not women. Then there are the Meraglim, they did not merit Olam Haba. Generation of the wilderness who spoke slander, that's the generation leaving Mitzrayim. Congregation of Korach, I think they were all eaten up by the earth. Members of the lost 10 tribes, people of an apostate city. An apostate city is a city where most of the people denied the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Akiva added, those who read his heretical books. Okay, so that's your First Amendment. I guess people who believe the First Amendment to read heretical books will not be allowed to enter Olam Haba. Those who pray over a wound because God said that I will place none of these diseases upon you. So if you daven over a wound thinking that some strange God is going to save you, that you do not merit Olam Haba. Rabbi Saul added, those who pronounce the Tetragrammaton, that's God's name, you know, Yud Hey Vav Hey, you're pronouncing it correctly. Those who say that are not entitled to reach Olam Haba, because you're not supposed to say that. Okay, and we don't say it. The Mishnah switches to the inhabitants of an apostate city. Passengers passing through the city are not counted. They are not counted in those who cannot enter Olam Haba because they're passengers. A minority of apostates in an apostate city are tried as individuals. In other words, if an apostate city has a large number of people and there's a minority, they're tried as individuals. The property is seized and destroyed, except for Truma. That's the priest's portion. That's owed to the priest. The property of the apostates is destroyed, except for the Truma, owed the priests. That is left to rot. Again, there's rationale for this. I don't fully understand why, but I'm just, the Mishnah doesn't go into a lot of the reasons. The apostate city may not be rebuilt, but the land can be used for gardens and orchards. So I wonder, those kibbutzim in Israel that use gardens and orchards, I wonder if they were ever apostate cities. I just don't know. Okay. The chapter 11, that was chapter 10. Chapter 11 goes into chapter 11 discusses who's to be strangled. Wow. Now this is the last Sanhedrin in the final note of the Sanhedrin, the Masechet Sanhedrin. So the Mishnah discusses the very end. The very end is who's to be strangled, who's to be killed by that form of punishment. And so they list the kinds of people, the kinds of situations where people are going to be strangled. One who strikes his father or mother and causes a wound. One who kidnaps a person from Israel and brings him into the home and uses him as a slave. One cursing the parents after their death. Okay? An elder who rebels a decision of the court. If the rebel repeats his rebellious teaching and gives a decision, however, he is exempt from being strangled if he was not empowered with authority to instruct. In other words, if he's a false tzaddik or a false judge, then no matter what he says, it's irrelevant because he has no authority to instruct. So he's an amateur, so he is not strangled. One who disregards only those who are really qualified and who give wrong advice can be strangled. One who disregards the words of the scribes is more guilty than one who disregards the law. Last page. The death penalty is not carried out by the court in his own city where the miscreant lives, or by the court at Yavne. I guess Yavne had a court, but by the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. That's very serious. Capital punishment can only be conducted by the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. And the Sanhedrin rarely executed people. Rarely did that. I heard that if the Sanhedrin executes someone more than once in 100 years or something, that's considered a crooked Sanhedrin, something like that. It's not like Georgia. And the execution the prisoner is held in Jerusalem until the next Shalosh Regalim festival. So the executions are not delayed, but they wait until Shalosh Regalim. And notices are sent out to all the places that so-and-so has been sentenced to death. So let's see, false prophets, it talks about false prophets. And false prophets are people who prophesy what no one before him has said, or prophesied what was not told to him, prophesied to have received a message that was communicated to him by another prophet, and a prophet who suppresses a divine message which he had received with instruction to communicate. Now, these people who are false prophets are not strangled, but they are killed at the hands of heaven. And that's probably because their crimes were against heaven. Their crimes were against, I imagine, they're against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, we'll take care of them, you don't have to strangle them. Now, strangulation is for people who prophesy in the name of other gods. In other words, idolaters, they can be strangled. Or people who declare what is unclean when it's clean, or people who declare what is clean that is unclean. Or even people who declare what is clean if they're not qualified to do so. An adulterer, even if the marriage was not consummated, that person can still be strangled, which is strange. An adulterer who conducts his affairs before the legal marriage was consummated, he can still be strangled. A false witness against the daughter of a Kohen, so someone who is a witness against the daughter of a Kohen, that's very serious. A false witness, that person can be strangled because that person committed perjury against the daughter of a Kohen. False witnesses face the same death penalty that the guilty would have faced if convicted. So if the person would be convicted of such and such as a false witness, the false witness suffers the same punishment. That's a rather harsh ending, I think. And that ends that's what I learned from reading the last 2 chapters of Sanhedrin. I promised Jonathan I would study this on my own, and I did. And that's how it ended up. What? You don't need this.
Say the Hadron.
Oh, the Hadron. I'm going to say the Hadron. I'm going to say the Hadron. By the way, this was given to me by the members of Torah Academy. The school devoted 1 day of learning for my mother. Harezel Bas Yitzhak, that was my mother's name. Yitzhak was her father, who left her when she was born, after he learned that there would be no bris milah. And he left to avoid the army of the Tsar, because they were all, grabbing people, they were hopping them in. And he did not want to be in the army, he wanted to get some economic opportunity. So he left his wife and worked, and with the idea of bringing them over. But she died about 3 years later from what we know as the tif. It's a Yiddish word which means like a tif, is like a fever, a high fever. And that's the time when the flu, the influenza epidemic was throughout Europe. At that time, 1914, 17, there was a huge influenza epidemic all around Europe, and about 1/4 or 1/5 maybe the population was decimated. You probably know about that. was decimated by the influenza. They had no antibiotics, no nothing, just hot chicken soup if you could get it, and stay in bed, I guess. And they didn't even have lemons, vitamin C in the ghettos. People told me that who lived in Poland, they rarely saw oranges in the wintertime. So we think she died from the teeth, from the high fever. And my mother remembered that her mother was laid out on a board in the one-room house in which she lived, with candle at the head. So it's laid out on a board, a wooden board, with the tachrichim, over her, with a candle at the head, before they picked up the body and moved it to the, to the gravesite. My mother remembered that, and she told me that. It's hard to believe, because there was no such thing as a funeral, by the way. Funeral homes are something new in America. But in Europe, they didn't have any funeral homes. People just, if they passed away, they were brought right to the cemetery. There was a service at the cemetery. The word for, not for funeral, but what's the word when you accompany somebody to the gravesite? There's a levaya. Yeah, levaya means you accompany to the gravesite. But people take it to mean a funeral, but it's not really a funeral, because funerals were not done in Europe in that way. Okay, but we know that funeral homes existed in the United States from the westerns, from Western movies, because they always had carriages or cars with a funeral. The guy performed a funeral, whatever it was. But in Europe, they had no such things. Anyway, Hadron Alech. Seder Nezikim Me'od, V'Hadron Olon, Da'ator, Seder Nezikim Me'od, V'Da'ator, Olon, Lo, Nitnshei, Minon, Seder Nezikim Me'on, V'Lo Tidnoshe, Minon, Lo Ba'omo, Hodin, V'Lo Ba'omo, Do'atai. Okay? Harav no Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratecha b'finu, b'fifiot, amcho Beit Yisrael, v'niyeh, אנחנו בצאצאים, בצאצאי, עמך בית ישראל, כולנו ידע שמך ולומדי תורתך מאוהבי תחת מנה מצוותיך, כי לעולם היא לי יהי לבי תמים בחוקיך, למען לא אבוש, לעולם לא אשכח בפיקודך, כי בום חייתנו, ברוך אתה אדוני למדי חוקיך, אמן, 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 סלע ועד. מודים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, ששמתו חלקנו מיושבי בית המדרש ולא שמתו חלקנו מיושבי קורבנות. שאו משכימים והם משכימים, אנו משכימים לדברי תורה והם משכימים לדברים בטלים. אנו עמלים והם עמלים, אנו עמלים ומקבלים שכר, והם עמלים ואינם מקבלים שכר. אנו רוצים והם רוצים, אנו רוצים לחי עולם הבא, והם רוצים לבאר שחת, שנאמר, ואתה אלוהינו תורה דום, לבאר שחת, אנשי דומים ומרמה לא יחצו ימיהם, ואני אפתח בך. יהי רצון לפניך אדוני אלוהי כשם שעזרתני לסיים סדר נזיקים מאוד. כן תעזרני להתחיל מסכתות וספרים אחרים ולסיימון, ללמוד ולמד, לשמור, לעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך, ויהווה וזכות כל תענועים והמורים ותלמידי חכמים יעמוד לי ולזרי, שלא תמוש התורה מפי ומפי זרי וזרע וזרי עד עולם, ותתקיים בי בחטאך תנחם אותך, בשוכבך תשמור עליך, והקיצותה היא תשיחך, כי בי ירבו ימיך, ויוספו לך שנות חיים, אורך ימים באמינו בשמאלה, אשר וכבוד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יבורך את עמו בשלום. Kaddish in the other room?
No, just face this.
Oh, face this one, okay. יתקבל יקדש שמי רבו. יהי אותי, יהי חדותו, וחיותו, ומתיות, ועסוקו, יתוכו, וחי עולמו, ולבני, קרתו, די ירושלים, ושללו, היכללה בגבי, ולמכר פולחנו, נו חרוע מן הרע ולעת טובה פולחנו דין שמיה לעת רע וימלוך קדושה בריך הוא במלכותי ויקרא ויצמח בקונו ויקרא משיחי בחייכון ובמכון וחיי בכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן חריב ויאמרו אמן.
ישמי רבו מבורך, עולם ועולמי עולמיה.
יזברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתעטר ויתעלה ויתעלו שמי דקודשו בריך הוא לאלו מן כל ברכוסו ושירוסו תושבחוסו ונחמוסו תאמינון ביומו ויאמרו אמן. על ישראל ועל רבנון ועל כל תלמידיהם ועל כל תלמידיהם ועל כל מונדו עוסקים ברייסו די ועטרו הדין ודי בכל עשר ועשר יהי לכון ולכון שלום הרבה וכינו וכיסטו ורחמים חיים אריכים ומזוני רוויחי ופקונו מן קדום ובהון וישמעיה ויראו ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. ועושה שלום במרומיו הוא ברחמיו יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
אמן.